hearing that you can realize such profound health benefits from a relatively low effort.
Yeah.
Yes, that's why it's, I think, become so popular.
This is Generation Health. Each week, we bring you the latest news, cutting-edge research, and time-tested best practices, helping you live a longer, better life. I got it right that time. Sitting across from me, Mr. Dante DiMatteo, registered pharmacist, certified strength and conditioning specialist, looking very good in a black t-shirt.
You were just hating on it, though.
No, I wasn't hating on it. I was just making sure that
we tell the truth on here, and you were hating on my sleeves.
A truth space.
You thought I had deodorant on my sleeve.
I was looking out for you, but it's a style choice. I'm old. You're young and hip.
You're just mad because your black sleeves don't have deodorant on the sides.
It's true. It's true. That's it. I'm very sad about that. Also, riding mic number 3, Josiah Schweinberg. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Thank you.
Hey, Josiah.
I do not have deodorant on my sleeves, so I'm good.
And now there's a camera on you too, so people can see that there is no deodorant on you. Everybody that's not watching, the people that are only listening, this is a really good reason. You should be watching so that you can see Dante's sweaty sleeves get rolled in.
Oh, man.
Appropriate conversation because we're going to be talking about cardio, about zone 2, about exercise, and about whether or not kids are getting enough of it. But first, what historical sporting event would you like to witness?
Oh. I mean, how far back are we talking?
I mean, historical. So I'd have to say...
Is like a 30s baseball game historic?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm looking it up.
You're going to look up one in particular?
Yeah.
Are you going to look for the... Oh, I know what you're looking for.
I would say... Man, that's tough. I would still probably say some early baseball stuff.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Are you looking...
Yeah, just because there's so many old stories about how hard they threw, how they hit the ball 550 feet, and so ate 16 hot dogs before the game that he played. Like there's all these old time stories that, like, you know, they were way better, didn't need to eat as healthy, they recovered better than us, all this kind of stuff. So I would like to see some of those old time baseball games, like Babe Ruth era.
We know Babe Ruth was not a healthy individual.
Yeah. Yeah.
That would be fun to see the one where he called the shot.
Yeah, that would be tight.
I
would like to go back to that game.
You'd have to go back that far to see the last time the Pittsburgh Pirates were any good.
It's true.
Hot take. Not in my lifetime, so.
Is that what you were going to go back to see?
No. I'd probably go back to see The Miracle on Ice, the 1980s men's gold medal game.
That was against the Russians, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And there was, so like, Olympic gold medal games now, like, I don't know, like, how much America really gets behind or a country gets behind, you know?
Yeah.
But I think there was a lot going on around culture and world and the Berlin Wall and a lot of things. So it might have been cool to have the nation rally behind something.
Absolutely.
Again, and unite over something.
Yeah.
And it be a sport.
Yeah.
I think that would be cool to see.
That actually is close to my answer. You said Berlin. I would want to see the 1936 Berlin games, specifically Jesse Owens facing off against Hitler, because that's awesome. When I found out about that, like saw the footage and the historical reality of, so if memory serves, they were supposed to be in Berlin. Hitler was Hitler, and he didn't want anybody that was a minority or Jewish competing in the games, and he tried to just ban them because they were in Berlin. And so the Olympic Committee was like, yeah, no, you can't do that. And Barcelona set up to have an alternate Olympic Games that actually never got underway because of the revolution. But nevertheless, they went back to Berlin. Hitler relented on his restrictions, and Jesse Owens got to stare him down and then win a whole bunch of gold medals. I think that would be amazing.
I know nothing about this.
Oh, you didn't know about this?
No.
Dude, you got to read about this.
That's pretty cool.
It is super cool. It was one of those moments when it was like, yes!
Yeah.
And most of the world was celebrating with us. Not,
you don't get too many of those anymore.
No. We're playing footsie again.
I know. I got my feet.
You like to stretch
extended.
your legs out.
Yeah,
I
got to stretch out
as tight underneath me as I possibly can.
We got to figure this out.
It's true. people getting weird things over here. All right. We are going to talk about a bunch of fun stuff today. Let's start off with an email. This one is from Matt. He emailed us questions at askjoedimatteo.com. That's AskJoedimatteo.com. When your dad was starting the show, I don't think he thought through how difficult his name would be to spell for so many people.
I think he was going to change it.
Was he?
Smith.
Oh, jeez.
No, he was not. You're starting rumors. I saw on a meme on Facebook. Okay. This is from Matt. Matt said, "Hi, guys. I need some clear advice because internet opinions are divided. I started weight training seriously about a year ago with the goal of putting on weight. Should I be doing cardio? I've heard you mention zone 2 cardio, but honestly, I'm not even sure what that is. Won't running be opposite to my goals?" His goals being putting on weight. Thanks for your input, Matt. Our pleasure, Matt. So my opinion is irrelevant. Dante?
As always, there's a lot of questions within the question. You know, and a lot of obviously a lot of area for us to, discuss different aspects of this and answer his question and also highlight.
Yeah, because I like the way Matt thinks. Mm-hmm. I don't run away from bears. Therefore, why do I need to practice running? Mm-hmm. I do pick up heavy things sometimes, so it makes sense to practice that. But I have a car. I can get where I need to go.
Technically, yeah, you don't have to.
Okay.
You don't have to. There's no need for it, to live your daily life. Your job doesn't require it. You don't have to hunt for your food. You're not, again, fleeing the bear, so
and the
to
fact
speak,
that my job doesn't require it, I have to thank you. If you do institute fitness requirements for this show, I'll be very sad.
Although you might be able to meet them now. You're already weighing your food. I mean, that's
okay. All right. We don't have to tell everybody. But no, seriously, what are the benefits? Are there broad benefits other than being leaner, which is what he's concerned about? What is the benefit of cardio? Yeah.
So the long-term health benefits of increasing cardiorespiratory fitness would be, these are the biggest ones, I would say: reduction in all-cause mortality, reduction in cardiovascular disease risk, so stroke and heart attack, reduction in the risk of obesity and obesity-related diseases.
Makes sense.
And also the reduction in cognitive decline. So there's some overlap with these. Yeah, there's some overlap with these benefits with resistance training and cardio. But yeah, those are some of the biggest ones. Often not big enough to drive behavior change in somebody. It doesn't always help to just say, hey, these are the facts. Why aren't you doing it?
Yeah.
But again, these cannot be more glaring. These are huge and should play a role in, giving you the why to partake.
Because there are, I see headlines all the time about big numbers, 74% lower risk of type 2 diabetes. Mm-hmm. How much of that is because of the running and how much of that is just because of, better lifestyle management and all those things that go along with somebody who actually runs. Mm-hmm. It's hard to kind of tie those things down, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when doing that kind of stuff, they certainly try to account for confounders, but you're right. It's often hard to perfectly, neatly parse out the silver bullet in that case. But yes, these benefits are, in observational data and, controlled data sets, it's everywhere and nobody's kind of arguing it at this point. So it's, it's massively important to keep those in the back of your mind, on the days that you're not wanting to do cardio or you don't think you need to add it or whatever the case. But I think just to go back a step, what even is cardio? What is cardiovascular training? What is cardiorespiratory training? Again, whatever you want to call it. All it is the ability to sustain an activity at a given pace. And it's this specific type of training that improves our oxygen intake, transport, and then how we utilize the oxygen throughout the body. And so it improves our heart's ability to effectively pump blood through the rest of the body and perfuse. And it also improves the oxygen carrying ability of the blood itself. So it's called cardiovascular training for a very specific reason, as you,
That's
you
a
know,
good
hear
po-
some of
I
those
hadn't
terms.
really ever thought that through, but actually that makes a lot of sense.
Mhm.
Okay. So you said say that again. It's the ability to maintain an activity
At a given pace.
at a given pace. So it's not even necessarily running like you're running from a bear.
Mhm.
It can be a lower pace and it's still beneficial.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Because in theory, I mean, if we use the fleeing from bears example, which I like, that imagine if you had to do that 10 times.
Right. I would hope I had 9 friends.
Like that.
Slower friends.
Right.
Imagine that level of effort 10 times. You know, like even if you had rest in between the 10 attacks.
Yes.
This is crazy.
But I mean, yes, this is silly.
Just
but,
imagine the sheer stress of the training,
right.
the sheer stress of that moment.
Yeah.
The think about how your legs would feel if you're running up a hill or you're just running as hard as you can.
Right.
Like those efforts, while yes, those intense efforts like that are valuable, they will drive adaptation. They'll help with mitochondrial density, and they'll increase the amount of mitochondria that you have available, which is, ultimately the one of the main components of utilizing your fuel sources in your body. So yes, it'll drive all that fancy stuff positively.
Right.
But you have to theoretically plan for the next 10 bear attacks or the next 10 days or the next 10 months or the next 10, whatever. So you do that all the time. My point is that it's very hard to recover from those very intense, difficult bouts. And so by scaling back, so to speak, to these different zones, which we'll talk about, you can realize some of those same benefits if the volume's right, and you can recover, hopefully, and go to work and do the next day and the next day and the next day, so that eventually you've accumulated all of this robust aerobic activity, so that it's not just this, you just blasted yourself 100 times in a row.
And I think that's part of it is that I've always gone 100% and within 30 seconds I'm ready to die. Mm-hmm. I'm waiting for the bear because I don't want to run anymore. Mm-hmm. And you're saying that's great, but also there's benefit in doing it at lower levels.
Right.
Okay. Tell me about those. He said zone 2. You said zones. There are zones. What are the zones?
Yeah. So the interesting thing about zones is, I mean, I don't want this to come off like negatively per se, but they're just made up cut points basically.
Okay.
So somebody at some point it makes sense. It's not useless, but it's just, again, you just have to view them as these arbitrary sort of cut points in heart rate. So you have heart rate zones. Historically, we've saw exercise broken up into 5 zones.
Okay.
1 through 5. Zone 1 being the lowest percentage of your maximum heart rate. Zone 5 being the highest percentage of your max heart rate. So for example, in zone 5, you're anywhere from 90 to 100% of your heart rate, roughly, depending on which resource you're looking at.
Right.
Zone 1, which should be theoretically very easy.
Like what we're doing right now?
We'll get to that, actually.
Oh, okay.
That's a good point. Zone 1 would be 50 to 60% of max heart rate. Now zone 2, 60 to 70%.
Okay.
Sometimes it's 65 to 75. Sometimes it's 55 to 70. It's a lot of time. The problem lies, as I'm sure listeners can tell, is like, what is it a bad thing if I'm at 72 and I meant to be at 70?
Right.
What if I'm at 75 and I only meant to be at 65? Those sort of things that when somebody finally does start to get moving, or start to do some conditioning that they're interested in, and then all of a sudden they're just lambasted by these details that they're like, well, it was a waste. I went too hard or I went too slow. And it's how am I supposed to realize these benefits if I just blew it on my zone 2?
Right.
So I think that's the spirit of why I wanted to answer this question, really. So it was a great question, but
your point being, it doesn't matter. It's not as specific as people seem to think it is, and it's not the end of the world.
Right. So it's just the craze right now.
Don't get hung up on the details.
Mm-hmm. You'll hear zone 2, and for all intents and purposes, zone 2 is a sustainable effort. It's an effort that you theoretically can maintain a conversation during. It's it's an effort that you would theoretically maybe have an issue singing during. Like, so it's a conversational ish pace. If you push below that or above it, then maybe you're starting to kick into these other areas. But heart rate is just isn't the end all be all.
Right.
The heart rate zone is just a proxy for effort. So it's not everything. So, and I think the biggest thing to take away there is different modalities of exercise are going to kick your heart rate into different zones. So you can't extrapolate the heart rate data. Like, just because you ran or walked at this given pace and your heart rate was at this level, you're not going to be able to extrapolate that to the bike ride that you had, or let's say you had a circuit with mixed objects and you were doing sit-ups and burpees and you were carrying kettlebells, and your heart rate's going to be way different for those.
Yeah.
And so it's to say that you were in zone 2 during something like that with kettlebells and so on and so forth. It's just different because now you threw in all these other variables, like the sheer nature of, think about holding a kettlebell, for example.
Momentary exertion versus the sustained.
Yes. And you're squeezing a kettlebell. You're basically like in this isometric frozen position, this bracing, which is by default physiologically going to cause your heart rate to increase.
Okay.
And just because your heart rate is increased, then that doesn't mean you're realizing the benefits of the cardio activity that you were looking to derive. So I know that kind of got lost a little bit.
No, I know what you're saying.
But again, just further proof that heart rate is really just another small piece of the puzzle of exercise.
It's a thing you can look at, but don't hang your hat just on that. That's not the point.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've talked about the general benefits, the overall benefits of health from cardiovascular exercise in general, and I guess zone 2 in specific. Is the point of zone 2, is the reason that it's all the hotness right now, is that because it's sustainable? It's a thing that anybody can kind of pick up and start doing, and the whole point is you can kind of find your place that you can keep going?
I think so.
Yeah.
I really do. And for a lot of people, high intensity stuff, that's an immediate turn off as far as jumping into an exercise program.
That's me.
So it's like, okay, something a little more sustainable is good. But then for some people who feel like they have limited time to say that they need to do 30, 40, 50 minutes of a sustained effort, 30 minutes on the bike, 35 minutes of walking.
Yeah.
To some people, that's like, I need a Netflix show. That's boring. How are you kidding me? Like, that sort of thing it all depends on who you're talking to. But regardless, hearing that you can realize such profound health benefits from a relatively low effort.
Yeah.
Yes, that's why it's, I think, become so popular. But it's also, now you have this zone 2. What's zone 2? Now you got all these people worried about heart rate.
Yeah.
So, but yes, that the short answer is yeah.
Okay. All right.
And the other thing is, so maybe somebody's asking like, okay, so then what? So how much of zone 2? If zone 2 doesn't mean anything, what do you call it? Or what, you need a name. So it's like we always need a name for something.
Right.
Call it zone 2 if you want.
That's why we have zone 2 and zone 3, is because we all have to be able to communicate. We have to have some sort of arbitrary cutoff to go, well, this is what it means.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's work into some practical takeaways, hopefully.
Yeah.
And I know Josiah's he's an endurance athlete. So
I don't know about that.
Feel free to chime in. We always talk about the physical activity guidelines. And so this is an opportune time to do so.
Yeah.
So I think with each episode that we talk about exercise, we kind of hit a different piece of the guidelines. And so hopefully this will help you make sense of the big picture and why some of this terminology is so confusing and just weird.
Yeah.
And so you have one person calling it zone 2, another person saying to use these minutes at this rate or at this perceived effort, and so on and so forth. So anyways, looking at the physical activity guidelines, we want to be at 150 to 300 minutes per week of moderate intensity aerobic activity, or 75 to 150 per week of vigorous intensity aerobic activity.
Okay.
And then also there's resistance training on 2 days or more per week, but we'll skip the resistance.
For our conversations, don't skip your resistance training. That's important. But you're saying Say it again, 150 to 200 minutes?
150 to 300 minutes per week of moderate intensity aerobic activity.
Okay, so if you're exercising 5 times a week, that's 30 minutes to 60 minutes a day.
Exactly. Exactly. Or you could up the intensity a little bit, or you can do some combination of those two categories. So you might have a little bit of, like we said, you need to, if you're interested in doing some of those efforts, like the bear chasing efforts, the short sprints, the stuff that you can't make time, or the bear chasing you or whatever.
No, let's chase bears. That's more fun.
Yeah. And we chase the bear here on this show.
That's it.
Let's go. I like it.
New merch drop. Bear chasing shirts.
Yeah. There's the best way to have an overarching exercise program for yourself theoretically would be to cover the different efforts. You have some really hard stuff, you have some really easy stuff. And then based upon your goals, you do some, if you like running longer or biking longer, or you have aspirations to just do stuff that's not as taxing right away, then you're just going to be on a different end of the continuum than you would if you are just more interested in your sprint type efforts. It really does. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter that much. Whatever you can stick with is going to be best. So focus there. There are adaptations of both.
Okay.
And so anybody that tries to tell you like you need to do all high intensity if you want to see these mitochondrial benefits, or you need to do all high intensity if you want to whatever, put on muscle, like something like that. And then on the flip side, if somebody's like, if you can't run 10 miles and if that's not all you're doing and focusing on all this zone 2, then you're not going to be able to whatever.
You're going to have a heart attack.
Yeah. You have to,
I think
there's so many ways to do this.
I remember you saying one time to me, there's no wasted movement, something along those lines, that it doesn't matter what you're doing.
Right.
It's always going to be beneficial.
Exactly. And that's a good example of why something again like zone 2 would be attractive, because you can just accumulate this volume without having to think about it too much.
Yeah.
Like if you're just like, I'm feeling good, I want to do some activity, 30 minutes walking, boom. It didn't like for a lot of people, or maybe that would be challenging for you at first, which is fine. But eventually like that just becomes something that you can kind of put into your physical 401k, like you just bank those efforts.
Yeah. My wife and I do that all the time. It's a great time for us to just talk.
Yes.
Get away from kids. We can go talk and walk.
Exactly. And so getting back to what we said about the guidelines, how do you then, so we talked about moderate intensity and vigorous intensity. And so how do we quantify intensity? Like how do you explain intensity to a layperson who doesn't care, or to anybody who just was like, whatever, I thought zone 2, is that equal to moderate intensity or is that vigorous?
Right.
Here's where hopefully we can answer that. The guidelines use something called metabolic equivalence, or METs. All METs do is measure the energy cost of a given exercise. And so there's this whole compendium, this whole listing of exercises and movements and daily tasks and odd movements. Like you can go and look at this compendium and it'll basically give you a score based upon what that activity is. So as you can imagine, something seemingly more intense, like running a race, is going to have more of an energy cost than sitting still.
Right.
So it just gives you very explicit, reference points for each of those activities. So the value is determined by comparing the energy cost of the activity itself to the energy cost of sitting at rest. So sitting at rest, they'll just call it 1.
Okay.
It's just 1 MET. And so to make concrete use of that, if we look at a moderate intensity activity, which would be equivalent to 3 to 6 METs, so it's just 3 to 6 times higher than whatever you would be doing at rest.
Got it.
And so that's how they classify these scores. So for example, again, you can look at this compendium, this listing. I mean, there's like how much energy, the cost of like pooping is on there.
Wow.
The cost of like walking up your steps with a bag of food is on there. Like it has,
no kidding.
It has all types of stuff.
What if like you have all of the bags of food because you don't want to take a second trip?
I think that's all. It might be on there.
That's every male.
That's right.
Every dad, every male, every husband, one trip.
No walk of shame.
One trip.
Yeah, like an active,
4 Mets for carrying all the grocery bags. I think.
It's very short though. It's a very short
High
amount of
intensity.
time.
Yeah. So instead of looking at, okay, how many minutes per week of moderate or vigorous activity do I need? They also have it framed as how many Met minutes of activity. So you would then multiply. So if you did a majority of your exercise at a 4, which would be like walking at 3 miles an hour or so. You think about like if you set the treadmill to 3 miles per hour, like if you have a feel for that, that's about what the energy, like the effort would be. If you did that, 100 minutes per week, boom, you have your Met minutes. And so it's 500 to 1,000 Met minutes of moderate to vigorous activity per week. So there's so many ways, like, unfortunately, if you're not looking at this on a piece of paper,
it can get
a little like weird there. And I understand that. So I would encourage you to like look to physically read this stuff. But again, I think because a lot of the health outcomes that we looked at, the all-cause mortality risk, cardiovascular disease risk, a lot of those are looking at, okay, what were these Met levels of activity? Like what were these metabolic equivalents? That's how a lot of these studies are framed. So I think it helps to say to somebody, hey, let's talk about this in terms of Mets versus zone 2. We're just kind of we're just kind of speaking in the language of what some of these studies are. But there are studies that also talk in terms of VO2 max.
Sure.
It's, Mets are not the only marker here.
But you're saying that a lot of these studies are such that it's saying somebody who gets 500 Met minutes versus somebody who gets 20 Met minutes.
Yeah.
And that's how it's judging one outcome or another.
Right. It's just getting everybody kind of talking the same language.
Okay. All right. So in answer to Matt's question, do I need to run? The answer is, well, kind of, but not exactly. You need to be moving, and you need to be moving vigorously.
Yeah.
And if it's running or biking or swimming or whatever, you will be healthiest if you augment resistance training with cardiovascular training as well.
Yep. And I think one more layer there too would be if you are cognizant of heart rate, great. If you aren't, then that's fine too.
Right.
If you have both, even better. You can at least just learn about what these efforts are. So what I mean ultimately with that would be, let's just say you wanted to do a zone 2 effort. You just want to call it that. We'll just call it zone 2.
Right.
So realistically, 60, 70, 75% of max heart rate. Okay. You can estimate your max heart rate. It's just 220 minus age. It's not the most scientific estimate,
but it's a good estimate.
It'll give you a very crude estimate.
Guess, rather. Yeah.
60 to 75% of that would be your zone 2 range. Go out for your run or your bike ride, see how your heart rate responds, and measure that subjectively to how you're feeling. Were you exceeding the talk test that we mentioned? Like, if you were with a friend, were you able to keep up a conversation? Or were you huffing and puffing? Were your shoulders rising? Were you starting to just, starting to feel that like unsustainability? Like there's a million ways to know what that feels like, but use that compared to the heart rate data, because I'm sorry, there's times where I go out and run and my heart rate will kick to 150, 160, but I'm like grooving. Like I feel amazing.
Yeah.
My breathing is fairly well controlled. And it's like, well, what do? Like, does that mean I got to like slow down?
Yeah.
Well, no. Like what if I only have 45 minutes to run, and in order for me to kick my heart rate to 122.6, I'd have to slow down to a 12-minute pace. And I'm like, well, does that mean I'm anaerobic if I'm too fast? Am I hurting myself? Well, no. So don't get fixated and don't let anybody tell you that like as soon as you exit this zone 2, you're going to hurt yourself. It's too fatiguing. You wasted it. You're a goof.
Yeah.
Like, don't feel like that, because again, everybody's goals, time constraints, all that kind of stuff is different. Now, on the flip side, if you're like, oh, I got this ankle thing, my Achilles is bothering me, my knee is swollen, I'm tired as heck, and you're able to go back through your stuff and say, you know what? I've been pushing all those runs pretty hard. Then I went from 40 minutes to 45 minutes to 50 minutes, and I didn't even check my intensity. I was just like burning through them because I was like a madman, you know?
Yeah.
You got to just look back, and that would be an instance where you could say, okay, maybe I bit off more than I could chew.
Right.
But it cuts both ways. Don't get discouraged if you're walking with your neighbor and your heart rate kicks to 150. It's not the freaking end of the world.
Right. And it's a good thing.
It's a good thing.
You want your heart rate to.
Yeah, you're still aerobic. Like you're still aerobic technically up to pretty high heart rates. Heart rate is just one piece of the puzzle.
Okay.
Again, you could be carrying kettlebells and your heart rate zips through the roof, but that doesn't mean that you really entered any sort of zone that could give you a cardiovascular benefit.
Right.
Like I'm giving this speech essentially, and my heart rate's probably 150, but I'm not realizing really any cardiovascular benefits from this.
I was actually
You know what I'm
thinking
saying?
about that because we were talking about sitting and doing nothing versus whatever levels of activity for the Mets. And I was thinking, well, we are just sitting, but we're talking and there's intensity in it and our brains are firing off fast and hard. And it's my heart rate is definitely not at a resting heart rate. So does this count?
Right.
You know?
Yeah, it's a proxy to effort, and that's it. Now, I don't want to gloss over that, you know, you could also look at something like VO2 max. You could look at something like resting heart rate to measure your fitness improvements. Like if you're like, okay, I've been doing this for 6 months, tell me if this is working. Is this working? I've got my Apple Watch on or my Fitbit. Well, you could look at your resting heart rate, and if it is lower than where you started, then your heart, that does, it is a meaningful metric. That is a good thing, you know, but that's just, I guess, a different context for it. You know, it just shows that if your resting heart rate comes down, your heart is working not quite as hard to move the same amount of blood that it was previously. So that's just, you know, just an example.
That's good. That makes sense. And I hope that helps, Matt. You need to go get on a treadmill or row a boat or something, because it's good for you. And at whatever intensity, zone 2 or above, get as much as you can.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And there's also there's nothing wrong with, I don't know. I see a lot of people joining a gym and it's all classes and it's all kettlebells and it's a million different implements.
Right.
And it's like, well, you know, they got my heart rate up. Like, wasn't that good enough? Well, this is a prime opportunity to just say that as boring as they are, the single modality sort of things, the monostructural movements like a rower or a bike, walking, jogging, like just you think about your swimming, very simple-ish movements.
Yeah.
Those are the places where it's easiest to realize the cardiovascular benefit.
Yeah.
You know, you're in control of most of the variables. You know, especially with the sprint, you know, even the sprint type efforts too. Like you're much better off if you're trying to do some high intensity stuff. You can do it a million ways, but especially early on, if you have a bike, you know, it's easier to do it that way than like, all right, well, I got a climbing rope, a kettlebells, I have bear crawls and burpees.
And I have to incorporate all of that in one exercise.
Like that's cool in and of itself. Like do that stuff separately for fun. There's health benefits there, obviously, but sometimes it doesn't have to be that complicated.
Just get moving. Love it. Other people need to get moving, specifically kids. Let me read this article. This is from a website called The Conversation. Physical inactivity is the 4th leading cause of death worldwide. It is also associated with chronic illness and disability. Recent research estimates that the world could see close to 500 million new cases of major chronic diseases by 2030 if people don't get more active. The World Health Organization, WHO, we like to beat them up periodically, but here they are. WHO recommends that children and adolescents ages 5 to 17 get an average of at least 60 minutes per day of moderate to vigorous intensity physical activity. This should incorporate vigorous aerobic activities as well as those with strength that strengthen muscle and bone at least 3 days a week. It's also recommended that children spend no more than 2 hours a day on recreational screen time. Let me say that again for my children. It is recommended that children get no more than 2 hours a day of screen time. These recommendations aim to improve children's physical and mental health as well as cognitive outcomes. Before the COVID-19 pandemic, physical activity among children and adolescents was already below the minimum recommended levels. In 2016, 81% of adolescents around the world aged 11 to 17 were considered physically inactive. Girls were less active than boys, and the pandemic has made matters worse. That is bananas. 81% of adolescents around the world weren't considered active enough. What do we do about this?
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough. I don't know. I think part of just continuing to have these conversations, as redundant as they might feel sometimes, like you just hope that it catches the right ears. And again, it catches a parent or an aunt or an uncle or a 16-year-old, you know what I mean? Just to, educate, but at the same time, it's hard to make systemic changet.
Yeah.
So I would not act like I have the answer to that. I don't have like a rah, we need to get everybody going and push them hard.
Yeah. Right. No, we're not pushing.
We just need more grit.
That's it. If everybody just had more, yes. Well,
I mean, grit is great. Awesome.
Yes. But you're saying there's not a simple solution.
I don't think it's like a grit deficiency systemically.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Screens.
It's
Screens.
true,
It's got
dude.
everybody.
Yeah.
I mean,
Josiah has grit deficiency.
what was it last episode we just talked about, making healthier choices for food for your kids, but it's like you have to demonstrate that. So when you talk about systemic issues or systemic things, like parents have to get involved with certain things also, and your kids see that and getting more kids involved in those types of things. But
Yeah.
I don't know, grit deficiency. I'm going to go home to my boys and be like, you need some more grit.
That's it. Dante said, what are the consequences of physical inactivity amongst kids?
Yeah. So it's a lot of the same things that we talked about previously with zone 2, but on the flip side.
Yeah.
There's an increase of obesity risk, an increase in risk of obesity related diseases, increased risk of type 2 diabetes, and all of that stuff. Plus, there's the increased risk of just not exercising when you're an adult.
Yeah.
And I think that in and of itself is leaves enough of a conversation.
Train a child up in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it.
Proverbs 22.
Yeah, man.
Verse 6.
That's better than I couldn't have told you that. But yes,
I looked it up right before this episode.
Did you really?
I was going to share it at some point, but
Hey, yo.
That's great. No, that's the point that setting habits young makes a big difference when they get older. I mean, I wish that I had started doing these things at a younger age so that I am not struggling as much at 41 to do all of these things. And these young people dealing with these issues of inactivity, screens being probably the primary driver, it's rough.
Yeah.
Most of the studies I looked up, I tried to find so many different studies, and everything I could find, most of it was from 2016 to 2018. So pre-pandemic, and none of the numbers were good even then. And post-pandemic, I couldn't find any solid studies after that of what's going on. But I do know, I'm changing subject slightly, but the military is missing recruitment goals. This year it missed by, I think, 25%. And one of the number one cause was physical fitness, that even amongst the kids who wanted to enlist, that they were not physically fit enough. That's crazy.
Yeah.
And has concerning consequences downline for our country potentially, but that's wild that this is that big of an issue. So what do we do for kids? I mean, how do we get kids? Are we supposed to be putting our 10-year-old in the gym and telling them to pick up kettlebells and run from one end to the other?
Hey, I mean, if they want to.
No. Come on. Lifting weights is bad for kids. It stunts their growth. Everybody knows this. I mean, that's what I was told. So
yeah, I would say at least like that notion over the last couple decades has been dying off slightly.
Yeah.
Fortunately, but I remember hearing that as a kid.
Yeah.
You can bench press, but I'd probably wait a couple years. And I'm like 10 or 12. And I'm
Right.
like, oh, yeah. Okay. Like, what were you going to do? Question it? But
You're saying it's dying off?
that idea is 100% dying off. It's not gone, because I'm sure if we talk to parents and grandparents, or all you have to do, actually, if you go on YouTube and you search like video of strong kid lifting 200 pounds, like click it. It's this kid, an amazing feat of strength, really
Right.
cool. You just look in the comments and you just see people like, oh my gosh, terrible technique. They're not gonna be able to walk when they're 40. They look crazy. Oh, my knees just watching that.
Yeah.
All you have to do is to get a taste of that notion is to look at the comments on something like that.
Yeah.
And it's a shame. It's a shame, because that's not the whole problem. The whole problem, there's a lot of factors. There's underserved communities, not enough, what's the word? Like access to facilities with the right equipment or with safe equipment,
Right.
or access to the right healthcare professional or the right coach or the right teacher. If only we could act like this was so simple.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But again, we're still undoing a lot of that stuff. What I really want to say is there are tons and tons of kids, like over 50% of the population, I believe, 50 to 60% of the population have kids enrolled in organized sport. Most of those sports, baseball, football especially, basketball, soccer especially, have, don't quote me. I want to look at some of these percentages. I had them and I lost them. The rate of injury in those sports for youth athletes is a way higher rate than any gym-related, weightlifting-based sport, any of those activities. It's a fraction. There's a fraction of a percentage of risk.
Well, it makes sense, especially with something like football, where the whole point is to collide with each other.
Right. But in general, it's like, what's the holdup with letting a kid get under a barbell, or letting them put a barbell over their head or lift up a dumbbell? I mean, what's the fear? It's like, oh my goodness, we're going to put a bar and axially load them and crush their growth plates? Are you kidding me? Like, that's the fear.
Is that what the concern? Because I had no idea. I always thought it was just like, I don't know, mess with your hormones or something.
Well, see, there's a lot that goes into that. It's funny what we've been told.
That is bizarre.
I was always concerned, like, literally, I'm pretty sure that literally came from, like, there are growth plates.
Yeah.
And they, secrete like cells or whatever to like tell your bones to harden and to grow and to mature.
Right.
And God forbid you carry something, or you like put something on top of them. Well, you're going to crush them. Like, they're not going to grow. Like,
So it's just common sense.
It's just common sense.
Obviously, this is what's going to happen.
Yeah. And so that,
oh my gosh.
I think like legitimate, like that's slightly reductionist, I would say, but that has prevented a lot of young people from, doing exercise before they specialized into all these sports.
Yeah.
So that is a huge part. And so maybe that's one takeaway.
Okay.
There's not a huge fear.
I don't think that. I think that
a
should
huge
be
fear.
restated very, very clearly. If you're telling a child they shouldn't exercise with weights or anything else because of something they're going to do to themselves and harm their growth, that's almost certainly nonsense.
Yeah.
Please stop that.
Right.
Let kids exercise.
Yeah. The growth plate injuries and those sorts of injuries, you're as likely to have those doing motocross or playing football or doing those sorts of things. And, just because of the societal norms,
right,
and, the way somebody else was raised, it's like, well, that was normal for me. It toughens them up and do what you got to do. Like we're more literally, we're more likely to put kids on a football field at this point.
Yeah.
Before doing really any sort of general exercise.
Yeah. That's a good point.
And so I don't know,
Wow.
that's part of the undoing, right?
That makes sense.
Grit,
Okay.
That's grit deficiency though.
Yeah. It's the grit. If you don't, right. Grit deficiency. That'll teach them.
All right. So give me some more. What else?
I like this. I think we'll just keep kind of spitballing. I don't think this isn't necessarily for coaches to make an exercise program for kids.
Right.
But this is just, maybe for a parent or for a guardian or some aunt and uncle, just what would be okay to let them do? Let's just say shed a little more light on the subject. Given what we were just saying, it shouldn't be inferred that you just let a kid unsupervised go in the gym. You drop them off at LA Fitness and say 3 sets of 12, all major muscle groups. Like that doesn't mean that either.
Yeah.
There's still going to be, depending on the age, more of a supervised role that you would have to play. And again, like Josiah said, you're going to have to be the example.
Yeah.
You're going to have to learn some of these things the hard way yourself. In order to, you can't give something that you don't know necessarily.
Yes. Yeah.
And I've actually run into that a lot with coaching. It's like somebody wants to run a marathon or run an ultra marathon, and I don't have I didn't do that per se, run an ultra marathon. How can I give somebody the tools if I haven't done it?
Yeah.
Basically that just means you got to kind of do a little extra to make sure you're comfortable prescribing exercise or prescribing this set of things, especially for a kid.
Yeah.
So I would say, if we shift this to younger populations, it would make sense to keep exercise, even in a structured setting, to keep it more play oriented. So when you're warming up, it would make sense to, keep score.
Yeah.
Give points, throw a ball, task oriented.
Have a race.
Go chase this ball, pick this other one up and throw it back to me. Like sort of, things that are incorporating exercise and teaching them to self-organize, but that aren't necessarily explicit. Like, all right, I want you to do this back squat, 4-second negative, 2-second pause, come up, take a deep breath, do this, stuff that's just it's gonna go over like an 8-year-old's head. And they're going to be like, oh, I'm going outside to play.
Keep it fun.
Keep it as fun as possible.
Yeah,
definitely. Now, as they show more interest, I would say there's absolutely no problem with incorporating sets of 10, sets of 12, sets of 15, do 2 sets, rest for a minute. Like you can start to teach those principles.
Yeah.
But they're not at the stage to say, this is your workout,
Right.
Tyler, you're 10.
Yeah.
You got it, dude. Just
good luck.
Call me after, you know? That's one way to do it. I mean, I've been working actually with one of my nephews. I didn't force him to do anything. That's also key. I let him come to me. He's interested in doing it. He saw the cleans and the snatches, and like you can tell there's a little bit of an interest, but I only show and teach and do what they have interest in.
Yeah.
I let them let him dictate the session a little bit. Like you go in with some constraints and, you warm up with a little bit of play.
Right.
And then you get to some patterns that make sense, air squats, push-ups, hanging, jogging, backpedaling, turning, hopping, whatever. You hit these sort of foundational patterns and such.
And how old is he?
He's 8.
Okay.
Yeah, he's 8.
Yeah. And so it's still play, but he's expressed interest and a desire to learn, and that makes him infinitely more teachable. Mm-hmm. Okay. But you are actually showing him movements and showing him this is how to do this and this is how to do that.
Right. Exactly.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And the key is, kids at that age, they, I think what's driving him potentially is just that he's interested in his sports. Like he wants to get better at baseball. And so he's connecting some of the stuff that we're doing, like, oh, maybe this will make me a better baseball player or basketball player. And so that helps.
Yeah.
It shouldn't just be all goal oriented in terms of being the best sports player.
Sure.
Because maybe there's issues with that long term, like telling an 8-year-old, like, you want to be the best baseball player ever? Well,
Right.
It starts now.
Right.
Grit.
Right.
You're grit deficient, and we're going to correct that this summer, So that's a key element of this.
Yeah.
Is there's not just physical burnout, but there's psychological burnout. And where does that cultivate?
Yeah, no, I remember hearing, I don't remember where I heard it, but somebody else talking about the notion of you want to be as good of a golf player as Tiger Woods. Okay, great. But recognize that comes with all the rest of what it means to be Tiger Woods.
Right.
It comes with the substance abuse, and it comes with the the broken marriages and the infidelity, and it comes with all of that goes along with it because it's you don't get to be as good as he is without having a jacked up childhood that puts him in that position.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe that's not a good idea to train a child in that direction because it creates a hyper competitive nature as opposed to a playfully competitive nature.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Definitely. The other part of that's key is just how do you have a conversation about something like that? It's like, in my mind, at least what the literature shows is you look at some of the top athletes, like Tiger Woods is an anomaly on all fronts. Like, he's the best of the best.
Right.
But as far as predictors of success, so if you really want to have this conversation with a kid who wants to have this conversation, maybe a little earlier than normal. I mean, there are kids like that for sure.
Yeah.
Like, they want to be a pro when they're 10 and that's it. And you tell them otherwise, like, they exist, you know? But what you stress to them is that, hey, the best players at the sport that you're playing who have done it way before you, they played a lot of sports when they were 10. They did a lot of different activities. They swung on the jungle gym. They swam. They climbed. They crawled. They tackled. They tumbled. They jumped. They whatever.
Yeah.
They did all these things. And it's, maybe not so black and white, but the numbers say that those kids who specialized later, continue to play football, continue to play basketball in addition to their baseball into high school, into their sophomore and junior year. The ones that waited longer to quit those other sports to focus on baseball, those are the ones that had the most success. Those that were the most well-rounded.
Yeah.
It's like academics. I mean, as much as I hated, I knew I wanted to go to pharmacy school. I was so, I knew exactly what I wanted.
Right.
Well, forget history, forget this. I liked writing, but because I wanted to go to pharmacy school, I hated English.
Like, when are you ever going to have to write for a living as a pharmacist?
Right. So it's those ideas that thinking back on it, like, nobody could have told me that really at that age, but it's really an apples to apples comparison. Like, you want to be as well-rounded. I mean, my goodness, like, who would have thought when I was 18, we'd be on a podcast right now having to draw on all these life areas.
Exactly.
Pretend, when you're 10, pretend like you need access to all those physical characteristics that you cultivated when you were 10. Pretend that when you're a pro, if we really want to go there, pretend that you need all those skills. It's going to make you a better player, and it's going to make you, more importantly than being a better player or winning or scoring more points, it's going to make you more well-rounded. It's going to make you more resistant to falls. And then it's going to make you more resistant to issues if you do have a fall.
Yeah.
It's going to make you more resistant to type 2 diabetes. All those things that eventually become part of the conversation. That all sounds like points in games today. That, again, you can be working on those things right now in fun ways.
Yeah.
In fun ways, for sure.
That makes a lot of sense. And the big takeaway that I heard too, that I want to stress again, lead by example and incorporate play. Those are the two things that I think are really cool. Leading by example, that's a hard one because if you want your kids to change, the reality is you might have to change first and show them how that's done.
Lot of responsibility being a parent.
Yeah.
Or an uncle or an aunt or, some sort of figure like that.
You're doing well.
You are. Yes, indeed.
Oh man, that is a ton. You got anything else?
I don't know. I think we can, like always, we'll revisit stuff.
Yeah. All right. Well, then we'll leave it there for right now. If you got young people in your life, go set a good example. Show them how important activity is by doing it yourself. And that way you can live longer and help them to live longer and better. All of the products that we mentioned today are available on our website. That is askjoedimatteo.com. That's askjoedimatteo.com. That website is also where you can find past episodes of this show. You can find the email newsletter where we keep you up to date on things. You can sign up or you can listen to old shows, the Ask Joe DiMatteo show, the one that started all of this. That's all available on our website. Go check that out. If you have any questions, we want to hear them. Send them to questions@askjoedimatteo.com. And any show notes, anything you want to check out that we referenced, all those articles are going to be available down in the comments area. If you are only listening, then you're missing when Dante switched his sleeve around halfway through the episode. He was sweating so much.
I was sweating.
He
You're
was.
grit deficient, we have a product. AskJoeDiMatteo.com.
That's not true. Don't tell people that. We have a lot of other very good products, but no grit. That you have to come up with on your own.
We chase the bears.
That's it. We chase bears. If you are listening, you're missing out. Also, if you liked anything or you have any thoughts or want to leave any comments, put those down in the comments. 5 stars, thumbs up, all those things. They help us out. Share it with somebody that needs to hear these things. Thank you to Josiah Schweinberg, Michael Deppish, our editor, Joyce Gibb, the nurse practitioner who handles private consultations. If you need to schedule some time with somebody who can listen to your specific situation and give you wisdom, she's the one to talk to. Diane Silverman handles our product. Terry does scheduling. Cecilia does distribution. That's Mr. Dante DiMatteo. I'm Tyler Andrews. Thanks so much. We'll see you next week.